A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. In this episode of My Community, we are delighted to introduce you to a very special guest, a female descendant of one of the East Indians who made Barbados his home. We are particularly pleased to have her with us today, as it is not customary for females in her community to share their experiences so openly. Dr. Hadra Diga will guide us through her journey, offering insights that are both rare and invaluable.
My grandfather would have come to Barbados in the mid-1940s, and he worked and established himself and so on. So when my grandfather came to Barbados, he left a wife and 4 children. And around the mid-1950s, he called my father and my father's brother, my uncle, over to Barbados. So my father arrived in the mid-1950s. And then he and my mom married in the late 60s. He called her over. My grandfather was an itinerant trader. I never met my grandfather because he died when as far as I know, I was a baby when he passed away. But I was told that, he did itinerant trading, and he at some point had a store as well in town. But I wasn't told much about that part of it. I don't think it was long. It lasted very long. We grew up my first 2-3 years of my life was spent in Mason Hall Street. So that's where we used to live in town. And then when I was about 4 or so, we moved to King Street. And I spent up to my mid-20s in King Street and Bridgetown. So I am a town girl. Growing up in King Street, initially we were the only Indian family in King Street. So all our neighbors, the community per se, were not Indians, and we got along very well with everyone. My mother got along very well with everyone. Those were her neighbors. They helped her, she helped them. And prior to when I was born and so on, my mom used to tell us that they used to live, before they moved into Mason Hall Street, then King Street, they used to live in Tudor Bridge. So my mother's friends from Tudor Bridge, they remain in contact with us. So because the community in the 50s and the 60s, when I say community, I mean the Indian community, would be very small, and you would have had more males than women anyway. So there weren't many other Indian women that she could establish community and friendships and so on with. She did, but maybe they didn't live as close to her. So she made friends with her friends. Her sister friends were black Barbadian women that lived close to her. There was a lady named Miss Holder from Tudor Bridge that was her lifelong friend. And I know that she learned a lot from Miss Holder. Miss Holder is the person who taught her how to cook all the Bajan foods, cook fried fish, helped her with the children, with my sisters when they came along, gave her advice, all those things. And there was another lady named Miss Rice. I only knew them later, but my eldest sister interacted with them more. Miss Rice, again, was a lady that helped my mother keep my sisters sometimes. And it's from these people that my mother learned Bajan culture, the language, the dialect, everything. That's how she learned about Barbados, the culture, everything.
Well, speaking of culture, let us explore how her family responded to the Barbadian celebration of Christmas. As children, they were active members of the community, and through their preparations for the holiday, they brought joy and cheer to a lady in the community who had no children of her own.
Christmas was a big thing. We would, we'd stand, we wouldn't be celebrating Christmas, but we became almost part of it just by observing. So the lead up to Christmas would be exciting. So the neighbors would take down the curtains, the house would get unpicked. They'd start buying stuff like Congolium and so on. Because we were in town, neighbors could walk into town, walk into Broad Street, was mostly Swan Street, and bring home the things. So we'd observe all that going on, the cleaning, painting, cleaning of the outside part of the house, and so on and so forth. But when we lived in Mason Hall Street, our immediate neighbor was a lady named Miss May. We called her Miss May. I don't even know if I knew her last name. So my mother remained in contact with her even after we left and went over to King Street. So she was like our auntie because we didn't have an auntie. We didn't really have like family per se. Like, we didn't have immediate aunties and uncles and so on. We had some extended family, like my father's cousins and so on, but nothing immediate. So she became like an auntie of ours. She was older. She was older than my mom. I'm thinking now that Miss May might have been in her 50s at that time. And every Sunday, my mom would send us, and it became like a routine. It became a weekly thing. Every Sunday at a certain time in the afternoon, probably around 2, 3, we would walk from King Street to Mason Hall Street. And when I say we, there were 5 of us, right? So I'm the third of 5 siblings. So it's 4 girls and 1 boy. But my brother has passed away. So I have 3 sisters. I'm the third. So we would all walk from King Street to Mason Hall Street to visit Miss May. And that became a Sunday thing, and we looked forward to it. So when we go, Miss May would be waiting on us. And then we would help her with any little chores around here. She didn't have children. We would update her on how our week went. We would quibble with each other, and she would get involved and so on. We would go in the yard and help her with the ducks and the chickens. And sometimes if she had like clothes, you know, like in those days, we used to starch the white clothes and hang them on the bushes. So we would help with that. We used to fight to do it. Then when we come inside, we would wash our hands and so on. And we would help her make lemonade and cucumber sandwiches. And we looked forward so much to that, right? And we would help stir the lemonade and so on. And we also were fascinated by the butter that she used to use, because it was a butter that she used to travel to a milk market in town to purchase, and it used to come wrapped in like wax paper. And sometimes we would go with her, but that's only if we managed to go at her during the week. She would take us with her shopping, and milk market was the place she used to buy her stuff. And we were very fascinated by this butter. So this is a special butter. I don't know, it was some type of English butter that people some shop in Milk Market used to sell. And you could buy it by the pound and the quarter pound and so on. And we really look forward to that. So, and we did that for years until we all got into our teens. And Miss May was like our family. So Christmas Eve, it was a tradition. We would go at her and we would help her clean because she didn't have children. And we used to look forward to that. So we would go and we would unpick the house and we would dust it off. And I was fascinated by all her things, all the little knickknacks. She had all these knickknacks and, you know, antique. Well, now they would be considered antique. That's probably where my love for antiques came, because I have a lot of antiques in my house. Yeah, and we would clean and decorate her house for her. And I remember my sister saying at one point, Miss May, go and sit down. Go and sit down. We can do it. You don't get involved. And we do everything for her, you know. And then my parents would pick us up like late in the night. And then Christmas Day, we would go back now to sit down and enjoy. Now, Miss May used to make, again, as I said, she didn't seem to have a large family. So we were her family. So she would wait till we come on Christmas Day to start to make the cake. Well, she would call it pudding. But, you know, she wouldn't, until we come, she wouldn't start. And when we get there, she would start and we would help. And at that time, you'd be beating it by hand. So we used to beat the cake and, the sugar and the eggs and so on by hand. And then we would bake it, and then we would wait, and we would eat, drink lemonade, and so on. Another tradition we had with Miss May was Independence Day. We always went at her on Independence Day for some reason. And I can still remember her sitting down in the dining room and just laughing. Because what we would do, and it became a tradition, right? We would go around the dining table singing, God bless Bim on Independence Day, waving this flag. And she would just laugh, you know. I have those memories of her. Yeah, so as we grew and we got into our teens, and I know she became ill and then she passed away. So my mom and then, you know, other ladies, my mom met when she first came to Barbados, used to visit her. So we had Miss Holder and so on. And my mom learned, again, as I said, to cook Bajan foods from these women. These women were her sister friends. I now can look back and see that. Because she didn't have her own Indian sister friends, at least not initially. Later on, yes. As the community grew, then yes.
Members of the Indian community are well known for their itinerant trading, moving from one community to another to provide essential items for sale. Within their own community, they also experience this practice with traders bringing goods to their areas. In Barbados, for example, it was common to hear of individuals selling ice in a similar manner.
I don't remember people coming selling ice, but fish for sure. The bread man would come with that push cart thing. Then you had a lady used to come selling bananas, and she would have the tray on her head. And when she reaches us, my mom would go out and help her lift it down. And then she'd sell the bananas. And then she always used to reserve 2 extra bananas for my brother. This is for the little boy. For the little boy, tell he come. And she would give him these 2 bananas, because we were close to where people fished, like on the wharf and so on. When they have fresh catches of flying fish and so on, they'd come in the urban areas selling. And then we sometimes would get people selling jacks and so on. Jacks and frays, right? Frays were these very, very tiny little fish. And my mom learned from her neighbors to make like fray cakes. It's a type of fish cake, but you have a lot of fish in it, fray cake. And then once the fray man came, and she buy all these pints. They used to have these cups, and they would measure it in a pint cup. That meant work for us, because then we had to help clean the fish, a lot of work. Another thing I remember is Indian groceries were not readily available. So Indian women improvised a lot. And because in Indian cookery, you use a lot of fresh coriander leaves. Coriander is extremely similar to what Trinidadians call shadow benny. Yes. But you didn't used to get it because Black Barbadians didn't know too much about it at the time. But then when they realized that Indians are interested in it, some of them started planting it. But it grows in cooler climate, so it's when outside gets cool. Like you see, like from December till about February, coriander proliferates, especially back then. Because now with weather patterns changing, that's kind of hard. So then they would come out selling, and they would come at the houses they know Indians live at. So then I remember them saying, we got Indian parsley. Call it Indian parsley, yeah. They would say, we got Indian parsley. And then, you stock up because you ain't going to really get any for a while. But that's another thing, these stories that women tell is one of the things that I have remembered just picking up because of the things they've said. Stories are very important, in transmitting culture, is how they had to improvise, right? Because I remember, and this is not because I had a meeting or anything with this individual, but one of the first Indian women to come to Barbados. She arrived in 1947. I could be wrong, but it's around that area. And I remember her saying stuff about how difficult it was for her because she had to improvise. So, like in India, they would use ground red pepper in their foods. So she said, she had to try to find pepper. She said, well, I didn't used to get the peppers that we have in India, but I would use what the local people use, and I would dry them in the sun, and then I would grind them up in this hand grinder I have. The same thing with turmeric. Turmeric is used a lot in Indian cookery, but you wouldn't get the powder type in those days, so she would, well, Barbadians did used to use turmeric. The older Barbadians, the turmeric was a part of their cuisine. It's only now there's a revival of it, but yeah. Things like that, I remember those stories. So they did a lot of improvising.
Well, today's community could learn a great deal from the art of improvisation, particularly how families and community members used their ingenuity to create what was needed to meet their household needs. On the subject of family, let's take a moment to step back and explore her early years, including her formal education, religious practices within the community, sporting activities, and culinary traditions.
Right, so I attended Wesley Hall. I say Wesley Hall Infants because back then, the infant school was mixed, but the junior school was a boys' school. So I would have gone to Wesley Hall Infants, both boys and girls, and then when it's time to go in class 1, the girls would go over to Westbury and the boys would stay in the junior school, which was a boys' school. So I went to school at Wesley Hall Infants and then Westbury Girls. At that time, it was not Westbury Primary, it was Westbury Girls' School. And then when I did the common entrance, well, what happened is, because, you know, of cultural expectations for women and so on, many girls of my generation and prior to me, they went to Springer because it was a girls' school, Springer Memorial School, because it was a girls' school. So parents felt safer, that their girls would be safer. You know, there's not a lot of gender mixing in Muslim culture, right? So what happened is, you know, when it's time to write the form, and my dad got someone to write, I think the only school they wrote was Springer or something. I don't remember. So that's the school I've attended. It was an okay experience. Yeah. I had good teachers at primary school. A lady that taught me in, I think, class 3 and 4, Beverly Aline, she recently passed away. She was, you know, a good teacher. The only thing is that, like, you know, as I said, I was very bad at math for many reasons. And what I didn't like is how they used to beat you. You know, because you're doing badly in math or English or whatever. And I could not understand that. I just, like, how are you beating me for each sum I get wrong and think that is going to help me to do better, right? That's, you know, that stays out in my mind. But she knew I was good at English, so she used to encourage me a lot with my essay writing and so on. And then at Springer, I did well. I was bright. You know, everyone used to say, well, you know, she's very bright and so on. Again, my issues were with mathematics because I didn't have a foundation. I lost that from early on, and then I never was able to build on it. But I did well, and, you know, and then I went on to the Barbados Community College when I left Springer, and I would have done, at that time we used to do Cambridge A-level. We also did the associate degree, and I did sociology and French. And had a good experience there as well. But you have to keep in mind that in those days, education at the tertiary level for girls in my community was not something done. It was not the norm. It's like you may get a chance to finish school to 5th form. Some girls didn't, and that was it, you know, because girls got married early, and you were socialized to be homemakers and that type of thing. So for me to have to, you know, go to tertiary level institution at that kind of time, that context, it was like very different, you know, very unique and so on. You know, we were taught from early about the religion. We used to attend, we call it madrasa. Madrasa is Islamic school. It's kind of like Sunday school, but we used to go every day after school. And there we would learn how to read the Quran. We would learn like prayers. We would learn certain religious etiquettes and so on, how, you know, how to treat people and those types of things. And the thing is, we did that. We would go to school, have a whole day at school, come home, bathe, eat, get dressed, and then go to this madrasa. You know, your father would drive you and so on. We went to Kensington. Some people would go to Sober's Lane. At that time, there were just those two mosques. We learned to pray because we have to pray 5 times a day and so on. And then within the home, your parents would emphasize and teach you religious practices and so on as well. Yeah. Extracurricular activities, because we had a lot of stringent routines, and the madrasa used to take up a lot of our time. And at madrasa was like a school, so you would have exams at the end of, just before Ramadan, you would have exams. And I was always a high achiever, so I always wanted to do well, so I'd be studying for that and so on. But remember, the experiences of girls and boys are different. So boys would be allowed to go and play cricket and any sport, but most Indian boys would go and play cricket, play with their friends, be out on the streets and so on. Girls, we would visit each other's house, and we would, you know, relax and hang out and interact with each other. But we wouldn't really be seen on the streets or anything. That wasn't allowed. And because we were girls, we were socialized and taught from young the chores of the home, you know, cooking, cleaning, looking after home. Because, again, cultural expectation was that once you get a certain age, you get married, you're expected to run a home and you have to do it well because you mustn't make your mother especially look bad. So a lot of our time as girls was spent with household chores, helping your mother do things. Back then, of course, because you may not have had all the conveniences like microwaves and so on, chores took longer. And Indian cooking, because of globalization and all that, now you could just go to the store and buy any Indian grocery. You couldn't do that at the time. So whenever it used to take longer. Like a lot of our things, used to take longer. For example, some Indian cookery involves using chana flour, right? Chickpea flour. But to get chickpea flour, you can't just go in a store and buy it. No, you can. In those days, you couldn't. So there was a white man named Mr. Hunt that used to bring in Indian groceries. He was the sole provider, importer of Indian groceries. So whenever he got in groceries, word would spread. I do not know how it spread because in those days, some people had phones, everybody didn't. But somehow you'd find out and you would say, well, you gotta go and visit Mr. Hunt. And you would buy the chana in bulk. And my mom would buy like 5 and 10 pounds of chana. And then our task was to put it out in the sun in pans to dry. Well, they'll be dry, but I don't know the drying part. Then we would take it to hill milling. My mom would take it to hill milling. It would get grind up. Then we have to store that flour. So a lot of time was spent, in preparing to cook and all those things. But we read a lot, my sisters and I. We were unique in that sense. I think some Indian families, people read a lot. We read a lot. Both my parents were avid readers, not in English. My parents weren't necessarily literate in English, but they were literate in Gujarati, and my mom was literate in Urdu. So they used to read in those two languages. And my father, it must have been my father that took us to the library when we were very little. So from the time I hit 4, I was a member of the library. We used to borrow books, and going to the library on Saturdays was a routine for us, my sisters and I. I read, sometimes you'd read out your 2 books that the library would give you, and then you'll borrow some more and so on. We bought a lot of books too. What little money we used to have, we used to buy books. So we had a library when we were growing up, my sisters and I. Yeah, we were known as the girls who got a lot of books by the people in the neighborhood.
It is clear that those many books greatly benefited the girls. A successful businessman always studies his market. He understands the importance of seasonal demands to his customers, and he ensures that the necessary goods are available for purchase. Our guest now shares how her father prepared to meet the needs of his clients in the countryside, who in turn had their own special way of showing their appreciation for the role her father played in their lives.
So there were times when, like, my father as an itinerant trader would get really busy. So it would be crop time, Christmas time, and Easter time. Easter time was the least of the 3 busy times, but it was still busy. So Easter time now, my father would stock up on curtain material, because you didn't used to get ready-made curtains, right? And this time period is like the 1980s, late 70s, early 80s I'm talking about. This is that time. So my father would stock up on curtains, because customers would change the curtains after Christmas is Easter. Then the ladies, the majority of the customers of the itinerant trader were usually women, many times women. And then they would they would want hats for Easter, because the way that the itinerant trader operated too, probably still, is that you could order things and he would bring it for you. Sometimes you could meet him in town and you go in the store with him, you choose whatever he pays for it for you, and y'all make whatever payment arrangement, right? So sometimes the ladies would order hats, and sometimes we would go with my dad in town at certain stores. I do not recall the names of some of these stores now, but mostly you'd go in Swan Street and we would meet the ladies. And because we were girls, we would get involved. So we'd be saying, yeah, it looked good, and I like that one for you, and things like that. And we got all involved in it. And because my brother was very little, we helped my father a lot in the itinerant trading. Remember that the work isn't just when you go out selling. The work is a lot of work goes on in the home. Well, it used to. So, for example, prior to when you get busy during the Christmas season, this was the days before you had ready-made skirt suits and jeans and all those things weren't the thing at the time. Women used to sew their clothes, and you sew curtains. So my father was stock up on the curtain material, and then we used to be at home. My mother and my sisters, we would be cutting the fabric, packaging it out. So my father would carry it in the car, sell it, or he would have orders. We would help him cut and package, and the floor covering, we called it Congolium or linoleum, whatever, Marley, some people call it. We would help him cut that as well. Yeah, but Easter was a tradition that, yeah, we observed. Barbadians were very loving and caring and giving people. And, that's what I remember. So sometimes when we go out with my dad, because we used to help him, especially at Christmas, Easter, etc., he would come home with bagfuls of things, or basin full of things at the time. Yams, ground provisions, yams, potatoes, ginger, this, that, the third. Christmas time, you have to go inside and have a drink with your customer. So we don't drink because we're Muslims. So they would give him, and they would say, I have the Coke there for you, or I got the malt there for you. That was a thing, He'd get cake, they would have a sweet boy waiting for him, and so on. Yeah, so those are all the traditions I remember. But as I said, Christmas was really busy. Crop time was busy as well. But what stands out in my memories is how Barbados was pretty much sugar determined everything in the country when I was growing up. And again, as I said, late 70s, going into the 80s, up to probably the late 80s. So as I said, my father's roots were Saturday was St. Philip, Tuesday was St. Thomas, but particularly Orange Hill. So Orange Hill was what has stayed in my memory. Orange Hill was very rural back then. My father's customers were all very into agriculture. A lot of them used to work on the plantation. So when he would go in the evenings, he'd leave home like 3 o'clock. By the time we get to the customers, it'd be 4 or 5. All of them would be now coming home from the ground. Things like that stands out in my memory. And if it's crop time, the route takes really long because on the way there, you have a cane truck in front of you, driving slow. You have to wait. A lot of the roads might be blocked. You'd get a lot of cane at that time as well. We used to drink a lot of cane juice because my father would get the cane and take it to some person he knew, and he'd get cane juice and so on. Yeah, that's my memories of an older Barbados.
And these are the stories we must share and preserve as part of the island's intangible heritage, with enough richness to inspire many theses. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for sharing and playing your part in ensuring that our people's stories are told by those who have lived and experienced them. This series continues to be the conduit through which these cherished memories are shared and preserved. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been My Community. As we always say here, do take good care of yourself and look out for the interests of your neighbors. The series continues next week at the same time.